Hello, how are you doing? Thanks for joining me again. Do you recognise this place? This is where I started my street safari in Manchester about a year ago. And today I thought I would try and do something a bit similar, but with a little twist. Last time I tried to keep everything simple, show head height angles, no shallow focus. I'm going to use every trick in the book today. Going in really close, very shallow depth of field, weird high and low vantage points to try and get something different. Right, let's crack on. So as usual, when I'm doing street photography, I'm out with the Panasonic G100 digital camera, and I've got a 14 to 45mm image stabilized lens and a 20mm pancake lens, which is what I shoot most of my stuff on. So as I left the Metrolink station, went round the corner and past a bit of wasteland, which I normally just walk straight past. Today I decided to stop to get my first tick in the checkbox of Photography 101 techniques. And there were some nice blackberries that had just come into fruit. So I thought I'd get a low angled close up looking at the brambles. That would be something a bit different from what I would normally do, because I don't tend to use low vantage points at all. I tend to go head height. And I think this kind of works. It kind of reminds me of what I did back in the early days, basically HDR before HDR was a thing. But I just thought it was a little bit too much. So I moved on. After taking that shot, I walked down onto the canal, which takes you from Cornbrook into Manchester city centre, and I paused to get a high vantage point looking down on the towpath. And I kind of like this picture as well. I deliberately shot this out of focus because I just wanted to get the colours to come out, not keeping it pure. You can see exactly what's happening. There's a runner checking their watch as they run past. But you could just say, well, it looks out of focus to me, and I'd have to accept that. A lot of photography is about intention and proving intention, isn't it? So I'm walking on the towpath that leads from Cornbrook into city centre Manchester, and I usually don't take any pictures along here because there's nothing to really get your teeth into. But when I'm looking at details, there's always like little tin cans lying around, or just interesting flowers, shrubs, joggers passing by. There's things that I miss. So yeah, I'm going to try and get a few of those today. It is what it is, picture of a tin can. But I like the red against the green. I picked a red can because it shows up well against the green of the towpath. And I've put it dead centre so that it's got that graphic composition that I think you would be taught to do in a photo magazine. It's either rule of thirds or single object in the centre. So single object in the centre there. Trying out shallow depth of field again. Once again, I didn't want to show the runner in too much detail, so I went for foreground in focus, the daisies, and the runner out of focus. And I think that makes it a more interesting composition because the runner could be an anybody. It's not a particular runner because you can't see exactly who they are. Again, a tick on the amateur photographer checklist. As is this one. Again, I've used an unusual viewpoint and I've cropped the figure at the waist so that you get a mysterious composition, again, making the usual unusual. If you could see the whole of the runner, it probably would be a less interesting shot. So here I'd normally take a picture of the arches and get a nice geometric, but I'm going to go for reflections instead today. And yes, this is textbook amateur photographer, isn't it? You've got to take a reflection, don't take the object. And there's so much sense in all this. You know, it does make things look more interesting. If you're going to take a picture of something that everybody's seen, go for an unusual viewpoint. Try and mix it up, try and make it look interesting. But as I was saying before, a lot of this is about intention. It's about what you are wanting to do with your photography. If it's just to try and get a pretty picture, throw any effect at it that you can. If you're trying to elevate your practice, I think you've got to move on from these simple textbook tricks. Don't take this as like, oh, anybody who does this is an amateur and I'm a professional and I know so much better than you. I don't. I'm learning all the time. But I would completely understand if you think I'm being unbearable here. Just turn the sound off and look at the pictures. That's what I'd do. Now, another thing that I tend not to do is use really long exposures, but I've stuck the polarizing filter that I've got on the top of here so I can get a really slow exposure even though it's quite bright. And I'm going to take a picture of the lock gate over there, which has like a kind of waterfall, and that could go all milky. Not a great shot this. It does illustrate the slow exposure and the milkiness, but there's too much junk in the water that makes it not look very pleasant. I should probably have gone in a lot tighter. I decided to go for a wider angle, taking in the skyscrapers around the canal basin, and this one is a lot more conventionally pleasing, I think. I think this one
is far more interesting. And this is, again, the result of a mistake. After shooting such a long exposure, I think this was about 3 seconds, 4 seconds, the camera wants you to wait while it processes the noise reduction, and I think it looks at the scene a second time. I picked the camera up and pointed it at the floor while it was doing that, and that obviously messed with its head, and it came out with this really weird, mysterious shot. Certainly reflects my psychological view of the city more than the clean shot that you saw just before.
So I'm nearly in the town centre, city centre, but I'm still on the canal. So the question is, how close can I get to a goose?
And the answer is pretty close. I kind of like this. Not one I put in my portfolio, but if we're talking photography 101, we are on eye level with the animal. We're not looking down on it. So that's a tick in the box. And here's a tick in the box for the rule of thirds. Boat in the bottom, buildings in the middle, sky in the top with some lovely birds. See, it's things like that that make me think you don't need strange angles or long exposures, shallow depths of field. It's just a lovely geometric in itself. So I'll take a picture of it. I'm just turning around. There's great light on these towers now, so I'm going to go for a really close up and just get the geometrics and not show the shape of the tower at all. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Again, it would look much better at full size on a gallery wall. It's not designed for YouTube, but I hope you can get a sense of the way the geometry works and why I'm so happy with this picture. Great reflections, great light, great contrast. Up there is somebody cleaning the windows, and that always makes a good shot, so I'm going to get that. This one didn't really work because it's too far away. You can't really see the person doing the window cleaning. I do like the sequence of tops of the skyscrapers. They look like building blocks from a children's building set. And again, it's that idea of shooting an unusual angle. Didn't show the full building, just showed a bit of it. But still, I'm not going to give myself a tick on the box for that one. But now it's time to get into my speciality, which is street photography proper. So I'm walking down Deansgate now, and there's always lots of good people pics along here, so see if I can just grab a few shots. The first thing I saw was what I gather was a guided tour going to see Campfield Studios, and I took 2 pictures. The first one, yeah, okay, it's a crocodile of people, but the second one I kind of like because it looks like they're all queuing up for that red telephone box on the far right. Or is that just me? Anyway, I think that works. Moving a bit further down the street, I was just grabbing a few shots, and I liked this guy going past because of the rings on his fingers, and it got quite a dynamic movement shot there. And then another one, I always like to shoot people from the back and contrast them with people from the front. Again, it's sort of rule of thirds, and you've got one on the right and a group on the left in the smaller third. So it's ticking a box there, and it's also being shot from the hip. So that's, again, one of the things that you are encouraged to do when you're starting out in photography. The other thing, of course, is details, and not just showing wide shots, but getting right in amongst the grime of the street. And so here is a litter bin, and what I find interesting about it is partly the red chilies that are there amongst the cigarette butts, which you could kind of make some sort of metaphor about, and also these hexagons are the symbol of Manchester. It's the bee hive, and this motif appears throughout the city, and I use it quite often, so it's nice to have that there. One of the main things you have to learn when you start doing photography, as I'm sure you will remember, is to look for little details that other people miss and feature those. And so these little puppets, which one of the refuse collectors attached to his bins, and they were looking out at me, and I thought that was quite fun. A discarded vapes, disposable vapes, seem to me to be the signifiers of today's times and the modern age. Cigarettes are pretty much gone. I think disposable vapes are going to be phased out pretty soon, at least in the UK, so this is probably something that you won't see so much anymore. So it's nice to photograph that while you can, and to have somebody in the background as well who's unidentifiable, so not connected with something that might be regarded as not a positive thing. Yeah, that's a nice picture. And again, another thing that's just an interesting spot, a workman's helmet just discarded next to a bike stand, as if the person was going off on their bike and leaving their work helmet behind. No idea what the story was there, but that's kind of the thing, isn't it? You can make your own story. One of the things I did in my early days of photography was always trying to get pictures of people, like posters and real people walking past, and make it look like there was a connection between them. Don't really do that anymore, but I might just try that just for old time's sake. So I got 2 shots. The first one doesn't really work. But the second one, I think, actually does, because there seems to be a sort of connection between the women on the poster and the guy walking, between the second two women. And to my mind, it looks like here is youth asking for attention, and the older guy is just walking past completely uninterested. Now, you probably have noticed that he's carrying a stick, so he is probably blind as well. And that, again, it's just one of the chances of the street, and I didn't pick out somebody who was blind, he was just walking past. But it's one of those little chances that actually makes something more interesting, and I couldn't just leave it. It seemed to add another dimension to the picture, and I think with street photography it is all about looking for that extra dimension. Not one that I would use in a portfolio anymore, but if I'd shot that 15 years ago, then maybe I would.
So the sun's come out properly now. That's given me the chance to do a few geometric-y things. I've still tried to get some interesting angles and shooting through stuff, but now I've got good sunshine, I can do what I like to do most of the time, just get those geometric shapes.
And this is probably my favourite example from the day. I was walking through a tunnel that takes you under the railway line and Metrolink, and there was a guy walking just out of the tunnel on the same side of the road as me, through a shaft of light that I could see ahead. But rather than just shooting in the shaft of light, I shot the reflection of the shaft of light in one of the arches of the tunnel to my left. So that's utilising so many of those techniques that I've talked about all in one shot. Yeah, pretty good, I think. Coming out of that tunnel on the other side, you can see there's a Metrolink going across the top there, and there's this pottery kind of white tiling that is the fascia of a thermal power station or something that heats some of the key buildings around the town. I think it's an environmentally friendly power source or something. But it creates this really nice kind of Barcelona-y look, and I've got a nice silhouetted person against that. It's a shame the traffic light breaks up the geometric, but there you go. You guess you've got to have traffic lights, haven't you? I like the way I got the yellow lines going into the frame as well, leading the eye in towards the figure who's dead central. So I'm quite happy with that, but it is something that I've shot better on previous occasions. And here, this is just pure geometry of light. There's nothing going on this street. It's just light falling across and being reflected from the windows of the buildings around it. And I just love the pattern of lights. It's just simple, just something like that that just appeals to my visual sensibilities. I guess if you were doing the amateur photography checklist, you would put it in under abstracts. And this one as well, a semi-abstract, but it's again a reflection in a phone box of a taxi coming by.
I'm walking through Ancoats now, and there are some interesting sort of old style houses. I wouldn't normally take pictures of them because they're really, they're nice, but if I go for a very low angle, I could probably make them look quite different. Give that a go.
So yeah, I guess that's my attempt at it. I could have made it more extreme by using more contrast to get rid of the detail in the far block. You can see the paving slabs going into the distance, but again, it's rule of thirds. You've got the leading lines in there as well, so all the check boxes ticked, but it's still not very interesting unless you're a real student of architecture and traditional architecture. I guess in the context of what's happened to Manchester city centre, it is quite interesting, but I like more modern buildings, and there's one of those just coming up.
Now here's an interesting building. This is talking about angles, low angle, high angle. I've tried all sorts of different ones, and people going past here, the light's been changing, and it'd be really interesting to see which works the best, because there's so many different opportunities.
So this first one, I like the way that the two figures are looking towards the camera. They're looking at you, and also the mirroring of their stride. They're both taking exactly the same stride, kind of works, and there's a sense of scale. And I like this one because it's more dynamic movement, because the figure is right at the right hand side, moving into the frame. It all kind of leads the eye in, and it's a bit of a swoosh. I also took it from a slightly lower angle.
So I'm in the northern quarter now. Things are a bit more sort of photogenic. It's all a bit more down and gritty, I suppose. And I just got a lovely picture of a dog in a cocktail bar, and it's one of those things about just spotting it, because we've been so used to walk past and not see it. But I think it'll turn out really well.
Yeah, I think it did turn out really well. I wish it was higher resolution, because I would love to go in a little bit closer and be able to show that it says Cerberus there. That dog is the most un-Cerberus-like dog I've ever seen guarding this cocktail bar. It's lovely, and the little pink bow in his hair, or her hair, is just lovely. The expression of the dog is great. I took a number of pictures here, all trying to get some sort of connection between the passerby and the dog in the window. But the first one that I shot, I really like the position of the dog in the window, so maybe that's my favourite.
So another one of the things that we always were taught to do is contra-jour shots, so make everything silhouetted against the sun. So I'm going to try that here, and maybe a few with some people as well.
So contra-jour is one of those things which is great, but it can be overdone massively, and also it can kind of be faked up a little bit too much these days, and maybe this makes my point for me.
So it's getting on for lunchtime. I've used up 2 batteries, got 1 left, and I think I'll finish with just some general street scenes, people going by, some wide angle stuff, some maybe like really close up. We'll see how it goes, but just something to finish off. It's been a really nice morning actually. I've sort of covered the whole of Manchester city centre with a few exceptions. Got a few nice pictures, and I hope I've got back to using the old techniques, using the things that you're taught when you start doing photography about low angle, shooting through, reflections, all that stuff that starts to become a little bit cliche, and you start thinking, oh, I don't want to do that. But actually, the cliches work. That's why they're cliches, and hopefully these are some nice pictures to show for it, and then I can go back to doing what I feel is my artwork, having proved that I can do the other stuff as well, or maybe not. Anyway, thanks so much for joining me. I will be back again very soon. If you would share, like, subscribe, you know it really helps me out, and just have fun shooting whatever you're shooting. Drop me a comment. Bye for now.